order to talk about time at all, we have to talk about causality. Causality is what connects one event to another. So, in any discussion about time, causality is going to be very important. 25 years ago, when you were 6 years old, your uncle wedged the table leg against the stairway wall while trying to get this table up the stairs and into your childhood kitchen. And that event, from 25 years ago, led to the table rocking just a bit when you set down these 2 coffees 60 seconds ago. So any definition of time will have to explain this connection in some way. In linear time, causality works like billiard balls. When you use the yellow ball to drop the 7 in the corner pocket, no part of that event ends up in the pocket with the 7 ball. The causal event, the hit from the yellow ball, is completely separated from the current event of the 7 ball sitting in the corner pocket. You might remember the sequence of events that led to the 7 ball being in the corner and brag about it immediately afterwards, but the specific causal event is gone from the present. It now resides in a mental location, the past. The problem is this: when we separate past and future and make them into mental locations that things come from and go to, we are spatializing time. We are representing time mentally as having 2 distinctly spatial characteristics: location and separation. But time itself has no spatial dimensions. There is no such thing as location or separation in time. In terms of time, the coffee you had this morning is not to the left of or to the right of the movie you saw last night. The movie came before the coffee, but that is a temporal distinction, not a spatial separation. Time itself has no spatial dimensions or qualities. So when we spatialize time in order to represent it to ourselves mentally and talk about it, we end up distorting what time actually is. If you remember, we started getting into this earlier in the linear time module, how we represent time in our heads by spatializing it along a timeline. You tapped the yellow ball before you sank the 7, and on your mental timeline, the tap sits separately from and to the left of the 7 ball dropping into the pocket. But simply by thinking about this sequence of events, you have deeply distorted what actually happened. You have now turned what was originally a temporal distinction, the sequence of taps one after the other, into a spatial separation where the causal event is separate from and sits to the left of the caused event. And that's not accurate. Temporal events are not spatially separated. As we pointed out a moment ago, time itself is not a spatial structure. It has no spatial axes. But we ignore this and habitually insert space and separation into our representation of causality. We place causal events to the left of cause events on our mental timeline. So the causal event of your uncle wedging the table in the stairway exists as a frozen event in time for you, a point on a line, clearly separated and 25 years to the left of the table wobbling as you put down the coffees. On your mental timeline, the temporal event of the table getting wedged in the stairwell now has a spatialized location, and this location brings with it all the spatial attributes of Cartesian space. The causal event now has definite edges and is confined to the spatialized geometric point where it exists on the line. It is cut off from other points on the line. It is clearly separate from the current moment of table. But in terms of time, none of this spatial separation is actually there. The entire spatial separation between that moment on the stairwell and this moment of coffee exists only in our heads. It is entirely created by our OS, by the way we think about and represent time. In reality, the temporal event of your uncle wedging the table in the stairwell is not located separately from, to the left of, or in any other spatialized relationship to the current moment of table. Your uncle wedging the table is not phenomenally cut off from this moment of table. The table wobbles when you set down the coffee because that moment of stairwell is arising directly into this moment of wobble. The causal event, the table getting wedged in the stairwell, is arising directly into the caused event. Causal events reside within caused events, not separately, to the left of, or in any other spatially separated location. Your OS resists this. It says that your uncle in the stairwell damaged the leg of a solid object, and that solid object, slightly wounded, traveled 25 years through time to this present moment where, given the opportunity, it wobbled. In other words, your OS asserts an external cylinder of time and a solid object that moves through it. But as we have seen, none of this is actually true. There is no actual table constituted in any moment, much less one that has an inherent unchanging identity and travels through 25 years of time. So this billiard ball explanation of causality, where your uncle wedges the table and 25 years later, that same table wobbles, doesn't hold water. But this is how we've been taught to see the world. The event of your uncle wedging the table in the stairwell 25 years ago and saying a lot of bad words is phenomenally separate from the table wobbling when we put down the coffee. That event occurred in a slice of Cartesian space 25 years ago. It is spatially removed from the current slice of Cartesian space, and therefore it is phenomenally removed from this moment of table. Causal events are spatially removed from caused events, and so are phenomenally removed from caused events. Essentially, our Cartesian slice model of time introduces the same distortion as our mental timeline. It spatializes time and separates causal events from caused events. But now the distortion we are introducing is ontological. We are defining being itself as cut off in time. What a thing is does not include its causes. We are amputating being in time.